There are so many localisms at work tonight. There are so many states voting. Down in Baltimore, they divide it between Baltimore City and Baltimore County. This, I'm told, is Baltimore City. Magnificent mural in the background as voters go to the polls, as they have under an hour to do now. We're nearing poll closing in 5 states.
One of those places where, you know, the Democratic race is fascinating on lots of different levels. There's something like 13 people running in the Baltimore mayoral election tonight, right?
Huge, yeah.
Huge election. But it's also a place that ends up being very, very important on the Republican side, because even though it's 10-1 Democrats to Republicans in Baltimore, those Republicans get their say, and the congressional districts matter. I love nights like this. On the Republican side, the big question is whether or not Donald Trump is going to get to 1237, as Rick Wiley just told us he will, or whether he won't, and there will be a contested convention. Republican voters have some strong opinions about that, or at least they have some preferences on that they have voiced tonight. Steve Kornacki has some of that from the exit poll. Steve.
Yeah, the exit poll here, Rachel, points to some bad news for the Stop Trump movement. It's basically showing a lot of the potential Stop Trump movement isn't necessarily on board with what they want to pull off here. We asked Republicans in these states tonight, if no one reaches 1237, if you get the open convention, what should the convention do? Look at this. Nearly 70% of Republicans voting today said the candidate with the most votes from the primary season should then be the nominee, even if that candidate is short of 1237. Well, Donald Trump is clearly going to have the most votes from the primary season, the most delegates won, the most states won. This candidate would be Donald Trump. Break this down. Among Trump voters, they overwhelmingly say that. Trump's been talking about how unfair anything else would be, at least in his estimation. No surprise his voters getting that message. Here's the surprise, though. Voters for Kasich and Cruz, look at that. More than 40% of them agree with what Donald Trump has been saying, that if you get to the end of this process, if somebody's short of 1237 but comes to that convention clearly winning the most votes in the primary season, that candidate should be the nominee. This illustrates, I think, one of the central challenges that the Stop Trump movement has. It wants to stop Donald Trump. It assumes everyone not voting for Donald Trump is on board with every strategic and tactical decision they would have to make to fight him till the end. The numbers here, though, are saying that's not the case. The Trump message is appealing to what should be the heart of the Stop Trump movement. Those are troubling numbers for the Stop Trump movement.
All right, and speaking of those troubling numbers, let's bring in a man who may be the leading road warrior on behalf of Senator Ted Cruz. If you've seen any of our coverage of this campaign season, you've seen that usually not far from Ted Cruz is veteran Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King. Congressman, thank you very much for being with us.
Hi, thank you.
And that's the Steve Kornacki just perfectly set us up for my opening question to you. A, the trend we're seeing in tonight's exit polling. B, the fact that your guy is campaigning in Indiana tonight. The fact that he is not favored to have a good night tonight. The fact that phrases like mathematically eliminated will start flying around after 8 p.m. tonight. So what's this all about for your guy?
Well, at first, the Cruz campaign did not expect to have a terrific night tonight with the northeastern states, and they're influenced a lot by the heavy media that's covered Donald Trump there for a long time. But this campaign, the Cruz campaign, has focused on the rules, the RNC rules, the convention rules, and I would remind people that every presidential candidate that I know of has been nominated by the party by the majority of the delegates that go to the convention. That's what we're doing here. And this is something new. This is roughly an anomaly that was put in place in 2012 because of the Ron Paul movement to create these automatic votes that take place as a result of the reflection of the caucus and the primaries. And Donald Trump is in a situation where he has 2 ways to win the nomination, and only 2. One of them is to get to 1237 on the automatic vote that will be cast by the state party chairman, not by the delegates that are elected to go to the convention. If that happens, Donald Trump will be the nominee. If he falls short, then the other alternative is to demagogue the issue so that he can intimidate a rules change to serve up the nomination to the person who gets there with the most promised delegates, and never let the delegates at the convention cast a vote, because if they do, then Ted Cruz will be our nominee.
Congressman, let me ask you about something that has been widely reported and poorly understood this week, which is this heralded supposed deal between your candidate, Ted Cruz, and candidate John Kasich, basically to divvy up Indiana and Oregon and New Mexico between the two candidates. It appears to have collapsed. I can't tell if it ever existed in the first place. If it did exist and then fell apart, whose fault was it?
Well, it's a difficult thing to execute, but all it really is just an assignment of resources where Ted Cruz has decided that he wants to put a lot of resources and a lot of time into Indiana. I think that's smart to do that. And I know Governor Mike Pence there, his values and the reflections of them reflect throughout Indiana. I think Ted Cruz will do very well there. And to maybe essentially send a signal that they're not going to put as many resources into Oregon or New Mexico, it's nothing but a tactical move. It may or may not be effective, but however you add these up, I don't see anybody yet that's pointing into this and saying Donald Trump gets to 1237 with or without this strategy.
Well, to be clear, though, I mean, the campaign managers both said that there was a deal, but the super PAC supporting Ted Cruz is still running anti-Kasich ads in Indiana. Kasich is still going to Indiana. Senator Cruz was on the radio today talking about how he's not at all conceding Oregon and New Mexico. Both candidates have said, I'm not telling anybody to vote tactically, to stay out of this race. It just seems like any effort to try to unite against Mr. Trump, to keep him from 1237, we had the first inklings of that, and then as soon as it started, it was over. Doesn't seem to bode well.
Well, I'd say first that it's kind of hard to track the logic of John Kasich and his strategy. I've had difficulty with that along the way, although I personally like him. But the other piece of this is with the super PACs continuing with their effort, that's an indication that they're not coordinating. And by law, they can't coordinate with the presidential campaigns. But they might pick up signals that come out that all of us would see. So I don't know if you can put a lot of stock in this, but the effort in Indiana is going to be a significant key. And when you look out across the country beyond that, you can look at Nebraska, South Dakota, Montana, all the states where Ted Cruz will be strong. And then California is a state that, I don't want to say the whole state is up for grabs, but it may well be. And a lot of that is going to be determined by the congressional districts, and Ted Cruz will be strong in many areas in California. So we're going to get to Cleveland, and nobody's going to be at 1237. I'm going to have to spend the next several months reminding Americans that we have a set of rules, and that is that if the nominee is not selected on the automatic ballot that denies the actual casting of votes for the delegates, except for a few that are not bound, then we go to the decision made by the delegates themselves, and they are elected and selected from the states for the purposes of reflecting the wishes of the Republicans within those states, and they're endorsed. Their judgment is endorsed. That's why they're there. They are elected. They're elected in the counties, or elected within the districts, and elected at large from the states. So it'll be a legitimate decision, but it's going to be the second or subsequent ballot that will determine the nominee.
Seven-term GOP Congressman from Iowa, Steve King, and road warrior in chief for Ted Cruz. Thank you very much for joining us and taking our questions tonight.